Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video with your classmates.
You guys, I have to tell you this story. And no, it's not about a superhero from a comic book. This is about a real-life hero, and her superpower wasn't magic. It was science. And get this, her discoveries literally made her glow. Seriously, think about it. A hero who doesn't fly or have super strength, but is just crazy smart and super curious. A hero whose best weapon was her own brain. I'm not making this up. This is a real person who proved that, the most awesome thing in the whole universe is just being curious. And she is one of the coolest, most amazing people I have ever learned about. So, you ready? Let's get into her story. Okay, so let's rewind all the way to the beginning. Before she was the super famous Marie Curie, she was just a little girl named Maria Sklodowska, and she had this amazing brain, but she lived in a world that had a lot of rules, especially for girls. So she was born in Poland, like way back in 1867. Her dad was a physics teacher, so their house was basically a science lab. It was full of books and cool gadgets. And Maria, she loved learning more than anything. She was so smart that she won a gold medal for being the #1 student in her entire school. But here's where the story gets a big obstacle. Back then in Poland, girls weren't allowed to go to university, like at all. Can you even believe that? She had this giant brain and they basically told her, nope, you can't learn anymore because you're a girl. That is just so not fair. But did Maria just give up? No way. She and her sister Branya came up with this awesome top secret plan. It was like a sister pact. First, Maria would work as a tutor and send money so Branya could go to school in Paris. Then, once Branya became a doctor, she would help pay for Maria to come to Paris and study too. How smart is that? Total teamwork. And guess what? The plan totally worked. A few years later, Maria was finally in Paris, and this next part of her life, well, it's kind of like a love story, but it all happens in a science lab. So she finally got to study at this super famous university called the Sorbonne. But it was really hard. She was so poor, she was often freezing cold and didn't have enough food to eat. But she just kept studying. And you know what? She finished first in her entire physics class. And the next year, she came in second in math. Isn't that just incredible? So around this time, she met another scientist, a guy named Marie Curie. He was kind of quiet and totally obsessed with science, just like her. They were a perfect match. They ended up getting married, and you won't believe what they spent their wedding money on. Not a big party or a fancy trip, they bought new equipment for their lab. Now that's what I call nerdy love. So now, with her new partner in science and in life, Marie was about to discover a huge mystery, a secret glow that would pretty much change the entire world. Marie heard about these weird invisible rays that were coming out of this stuff called uranium, and she got super curious. She figured out that these rays weren't coming from some kind of chemical reaction. No, they were coming from deep inside the atoms themselves. It was a brand new kind of energy nobody knew about. And she gave it a name, radioactivity. She and Pierre worked for years, and not in a fancy lab. They worked in this old, leaky shed. It was cold and messy, and they had to stir these giant pots of crushed up rock. And after all that hard work, they didn't just find one new thing, they found 2 brand new glowing elements. Can you even imagine that? Finding something totally new to science, all while working in a shed that wasn't even waterproof? That is some serious dedication. And the names they chose were just perfect. The first one they named polonium, after her home country, Poland, which she missed a lot. And the second one they called radium, because it actually radiated light. It glowed with this gorgeous, spooky blue light. So cool. So this discovery made them famous all over the world. But this next part of Marie's life was full of really amazing things, but also something really sad. But through all of it, she showed everyone what it means to persevere, to just never, ever give up. Okay, just look at this. In 1903, she became the first woman ever to win a Nobel Prize in physics. But just a few years later, something awful happened. Pierre died in a terrible accident. Marie was completely heartbroken. But she didn't stop working. She actually took over his job and became the first woman professor at her university. And then, in 1911, she did something no one thought was possible. She won a second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry. But Marie's story doesn't end with prizes. You know, her discoveries made a light that you could see, but her legacy, that created a kind of light that will never, ever fade. It's a legacy of science and of being a true hero. When World War I started, Marie didn't just stay in her lab. She took her science to the front lines. She invented these little X-ray vans. They called them Little Curies, and she drove them herself to help doctors find bullets inside wounded soldiers. Her invention helped save over 1 million lives. 1 million! And her impact just kept going. She started a big research center in Paris. And get this, it's like science was a family superpower. Her daughter, Irene, grew up and won a Nobel Prize too. The whole Curie family has won 6 Nobel Prizes. That's just mind-blowing. And for a final honor, she became the first woman ever to be buried in this special place in Paris, the Pantheon, just for her own amazing work. I think Marie said it best herself. We must have perseverance, and above all, confidence in ourselves. We must believe that we are gifted for something. And wow, she really lived by those words, didn't she? Her whole story is just so inspiring. It reminds me that we should never let anyone tell us we can't do something, and that we should work hard, and most of all, just always stay curious and let our own special talents glow. So my question for you is, what will you be curious about? The world needs more curious people like Marie Curie, and it definitely needs you too.